All right, let's start with the big story that we're tracking on WION at this hour, where it is now being seen as a big win for the protesters in Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong's government has suspended a proposed law on extradition to mainland China. Remember, this bill had sparked widespread anger and also violent clashes over the past few days. Everyone in Hong Kong had waited with bated breath for this announcement. A big proponent of the bill, Hong Kong's chief executive, Carrie, had admitted that there were certain inadequacies in the bill. To restore peace and harmony to Hong Kong, Lam said that views of the society and the lawmakers will be incorporated. She also added that the government has in fact taken the decision taking into account the prevailing violence and protests on the streets.
After our repeated internal deliberations over the last 2 days, I now announce that the government has decided to suspend the legislative amendment exercise, restart our communication with all sectors of society, do more explanation work, and listen to different views of society. I want to stress that the government is adopting an open mind to heed comprehensively different views in society towards the bill.
So why exactly is this bill so controversial? Well, opponents say that China's justice system is marked by torture and forced confessions, arbitrary detentions and also poor access to lawyers. Now, the extradition bill, if made into a law, was expected to in fact cover Hong Kong's 7 million residents. The bill has in fact got many concerned in Hong Kong, as this will now allow residents to in fact be extradited to China for a trial. That China could target political opponents. The bill could also be a threat to Hong Kong's semi-autonomous status. Now, Hong Kong's top leader, Carrie, has backed the law, citing that human rights will be protected by the city's court, which will decide on a case basis for extraditions. But in her statement, Carrie has blamed herself for the failure to communicate effectively to the public. She said that the original driving force of the bill was actually a murder case in Taiwan, which clearly had loopholes. Remember, protesters have vowed to in fact fight the extradition bill. Last Wednesday, the protesters had faced the police during a mass protest in Hong Kong, and tens of thousands had surrendered the city's government headquarters, forcing the legislators to postpone a debate on the bill. And also on the 9th of June, more than 1 million people had taken to the streets in what was described as a peaceful march against the legislation. And it was a huge show of strength, considering the number of protesters was in fact 1/7 of the total population of Hong Kong. All right, now for more perspective on this, we are joined in by Mr. Tangen, who is a strategic analyst who's joining us live from Beijing. Now, good afternoon to you, Mr. Tangen. Now, we've witnessed what's been happening in Hong Kong over the course of the past week. And a little while back, we also heard from the Chief Executive Officer of Hong Kong, who said that for the time being, she is suspending this particular extradition bill. How do you read this development? Do you think Carrie Lam has been pretty judicious in what she's done today?
Well, I think she's looking out for the best interests of Hong Kong. Remember, this was a piece of legislation that was started by her through their elected officials. They were the ones who came up with it. Now, keep in mind, first off, the million-person march. Remember, those figures were given by those who actually sponsored the march. The Hong Kong police estimated 150,000. I say that 150,000 is still a tremendous number of people. That doesn't diminish the issue. But we have to make sure that we are, in fact, getting the correct facts and not overstating them. Now, in terms of this extradition treaty, keep in mind that there are 20 extradition treaties between Hong Kong and other nations, but there is no extradition treaty between Taiwan, Macau, or the mainland. So it's not usual that they would want to have an extradition treaty.
Okay, so my question, of course, is, firstly, a clarification. These numbers of 1 million march, as you said, this was put out by the people in Hong Kong. So possibly there could be a bit of an exaggeration, but still 150,000, this is a number that you are putting out. Even that is a substantial number. So my question to you is, why does China want to have an extradition treaty with Hong Kong, a region that is fairly autonomous, that is being governed under the one state, two systems principle?
Okay. Well, I think it would be the same reason that India would want to have an ability to extract people who had committed serious crimes from any part of its country. You wouldn't say that Arunachal Pradesh should not have an extradition treaty or ability to send criminals back into the rest of
Mr.
India.
A small, quick clarification here. Arunachal Pradesh is a part of India, so we do not need an extradition treaty, but perhaps India would need an extradition treaty from another nation.
No, so is Hong Kong, and this is the very difficult situation. Hong Kong is part of China. There's only one China, and that's the way the mainland sees it. The difficulty here is you have a clash not really about this extradition treaty, but about those within Hong Kong who want to be independent, and this is what they're pushing. Any issue that comes up, they go to the streets. Now, this was not the same as the Yellow Umbrella march. That was fairly peaceful. It has ended in violence, which tells you that the forces behind this idea of having an independent Hong Kong are becoming much more aggressive and are willing to use violence and hurt people. This is something that is very shocking to people within Hong Kong as well as outside. I mean, remember, the policemen who were hurt are from Hong Kong. These are people who are part of the voting process. There's no reason for people to inflict this kind of violence on anybody else.
And also the question that I need to ask you here, Mr. Tangen, is the fact that, when in 1997 Hong Kong was ceded by the British, for a period of 50 years, Hong Kong was allowed to have its own autonomy. It was to be guided by one state but two systems. But here what we've seen is over the last few years, the autonomy of Hong Kong has been eroded. And the flashpoint of this has been reached in the protest that we saw over this bill that was in fact tabled within Hong Kong. How is this being viewed within China, that increasingly the autonomy of Hong Kong is in fact being eroded?
Well, I think you're making a statement that is not in fact. I mean, the idea that Hong Kong has been eroded is not true. This particular piece of legislation came from within Hong Kong. It was not sent in a letter from Beijing and say, pass this. And if you start looking at this, not from, this jaundiced view that this is somehow an imposition on Hong Kong, and realize that this extradition treaty was limited to basically high crimes and misdemeanors. And not misdemeanors, high crimes like rape and murder, right? Political, religious, tax, none of that was included. The extradition treaty with the United States says it's for crimes of 1 year or more. It would have to be a crime of 7 years or more under this particular proposal by Hong Kong. So this is not this egregious plan. Also remember that any request would have to be put through the Hong Kong courts. And I don't think anybody has any accusations that the Hong Kong courts are suddenly giving into pressure from Beijing. So this has been a situation which has been taken out of context. It is purely political. And people are not willing to look at this. They keep saying, oh, yes, this popular narrative that somehow Hong Kong has independence has been eroded. What has been eroded? Tell me.
Okay, this is at least the impression that the people of Hong Kong seem to be living in, and they, I believe, would have a much better idea. And lastly, before I let you go, Mr. Tangen, the question that I need to ask you is, this extradition bill which has been suspended, do you think this is the end of the extradition bill, or do you think the CEO of Hong Kong, Carrie could try bring in this law through some other means?
Well, it's 100% there will be an extradition treaty. I mean, it's impossible not to have one. Otherwise, you have Hong Kong as an area that you can harbor murderers, rapists, etc. I don't think Hong Kong wants that. They just have to get over this emotional reaction that's being driven by people on social media who are trying to say that this is the last defense against the erosion and independence of Hong Kong. There is no independence of Hong Kong. At the end of the 50-year period, Hong Kong is just another Chinese city. And this is this kind of popularized notion is what people are fighting. So hopefully it'll do it. Unfortunately, I do think that these groups will continue to mount violent anti-government protests, even when something even more reasonable is proposed.